Welcome summoners to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. My name is Tia with the hat, and today we'll be comparing Wild Rift to its parent League of Legends PC. Our goal today is not to label one better than the other, but to make logical observations on the strengths and weaknesses of both games. But before we begin, what aspects of League of Legends do you think Wild Rift is desperately in need of? We at ProGuides have been saying this for quite some time now, but we believe Wild Rift really needs more ways to acquire vision. Maybe in the form of pink wards? Anyway, leave your answers down in the comments below. We really do read them, and let's get right into the video. The first and foremost comparison between League and Wild Rift has to be the length of the games. Wild Rift's games last on average between 15 and 20 minutes, while League PC games last from 30 to 40 minutes on average. This is about 2 times the length, making the mobile much more accessible for players who lack the ability to make the time commitment. Personally speaking, I don't have the same amount of time to play League of Legends as I did when I was younger, and so if I'm feeling like I want to play some League, sometimes Wild Rift is just easier. Can you guys relate to this? Let me know in the comments below. But since the games are shorter, players are more inclined to give up earlier on Wild Rift. We're talking players literally 3 minutes into the game spamming "go next" in the chat. Yeah, League of Legends has their own set of players who give up early on, but since Wild Rift is so fast-paced, it seems that many players have grown accustomed to throwing in the towel absurdly early. It may seem like I'm just complaining, but the issue has become too pervasive to ignore and needs light to be shined on it. I'm almost positive that I'm not the only person who thinks this, and that almost every player that plays the game experiences these situations on a regular basis. If you want to talk more about players and just anything Wild Rift, be sure to join our community Discord where we can just be sad together and also happy. Okay, back to the video. In League PC, players start to call it quits at around 13 or 15 minutes at the earliest. But since the game is slower paced, typing FF or GG next doesn't impact the other players' mentals as heavily, since there's much more downtime during the game before another big game-impacting play occurs. Since the mobile port is far more fast-paced, when a player mentally slips, it becomes incredibly hard to refocus on the game. Players that type surrender, let's go next, often immediately follow up their typing by dying. Wild Rift is far more snowball reliant than its parent, so these mental slips vastly decrease the opportunity for victory. Let's discuss the gameplay next, which is catered to their according versions to accommodate for the length of the games. Take inhibitors for example. These are structural objectives that stand in the way of the nexus in all lanes, impeding the enemy team from pushing directly into their base. In League of Legends, there are inhibitor towers and separate inhibitors. Destroying the inhibitor grants super minions in that lane until the structure respawns. But in Wild Rift, there are no separate inhibitors. Instead, they only have inhibitor towers that serve both roles, granting permanent super minions upon destruction and never respawning. In addition, these are the last towers before reaching the nexus, making them sort of the most essential objectives in Wild Rift. The downside of this overall game design is that there's little indication of the importance of these towers, since they look identical to all other towers, while having the same stats. Riot developers should give these inhibitor towers more distinction, perhaps some gold plating to visually distinguish them from the other towers, or even stronger base stats to prevent the game from completely collapsing. Super minions spawning forever vastly decreases opportunities for comeback, since constant wave clear and pressure must be exerted in the specific lane. When playing from ahead, this makes for a very satisfying victory, but when playing on the other end of the spectrum, this creates an abysmal playing condition. Many of Wild Rift's base game is much simpler than League PC. For instance, Wild Rift's map is substantially smaller than League of Legends' Summoner's Rift. This helps push the game to be more fast-paced since champions spend far less time walking around the map. This is great for decreasing the waiting times between all in-game fights, maximizing action, but this also means that champions can roam faster in Wild Rift than in League of Legends. This creates a meta where the mid laner spends most of the time roaming the map in an attempt to impact the side lanes and snowball a lead, rather than focusing on the 1v1 laning phase. Now let's discuss rune systems differences. Both utilize a keystone rune followed by secondary runes. Wild Rift has 8 keystone runes to choose from, each offering a very distinct playstyle. For League veterans who have migrated to Wild Rift, they'll instantly recognize the keystone runes. Since there aren't that many to choose from, it's pretty easy to know which keystone works on a specific champion. League PC, on the other hand, has a total of 4 keystone runes for each tree, and with 5 trees totaling 20 keystones to keep track of. Of course, this grants League more versatility in regards to customization of playstyle, but requires a lot of studying and hands-on experience to simply understand when each one should be utilized. With a total of 74 unique runes, including the 9 additional stat upgrades, League PC's rune system is far more developed than Wild Rift's system with 26 unique runes. But seriously, 74 is a lot of runes to keep track of, and honestly, the vast majority of League PC players don't know what each rune exactly does, much more know when they're all optimal. For better or for worse, this results in much of the community having to rely on outside sources for rune and build tips, since the system is simply too convoluted to theorycraft for casual players. In Wild Rift, since the rune system is far more condensed, it's a lot less overwhelming to learn, practice, and utilize. Players can still theorycraft, and honestly doing so can be really rewarding and easy, creating an extremely accessible system for players who want to customize their playstyle. And for those who still find themselves incapable of understanding the optimal runes, there are many great sources to utilize. If you want to know more about Wild Rift's rune system, be sure to check out our Ultimate Rune Guide. This will teach you everything you need to know. Both grant unique advantages in regards to their rune system. Without a doubt, Wild Rift's is more beginner-friendly and could actually use more variety for their keystone rune options, while League PC can be a little convoluted, often resulting in players unable to realize the full impact of many nuanced rune selections. Now with runes out of the way, let's discuss the champion pool. Wild Rift has the unique advantage over League of Legends thanks to the selection of champions that they can just choose to adapt into Wild Rift, while League of Legends developers need to create new and innovative champions from scratch. This gives Wild Rift far more control over the development of their meta, moving it along to how they see fit, hand-selecting and catering the champion pool while not having to worry about innovative character playstyles. League PC cannot do the same thing for their new champions since they don't know exactly how the new champions are going to be played. Though created with a general playstyle in mind, there's really no way of predicting the nuances of how players will master a champion like Sylas, or exactly how abusable a champion like Yuumi ends up becoming. Fact of the matter is, there are so many players who are looking to break the game, finding new, previously unthinkable strategies to beat their competition. The testing that Riot Games performs can't predict and outmaneuver every individual theory crafter, with too small of a sample size during playtests to effectively accommodate every possible strategy. The champions Riot has been adding to Wild Rift have been fantastic additions to the game, developing the prevalent meta to evolve the game, utilizing their knowledge from League PC to generally know what specific balance adjustments they need to implement to make the newer champions more prevalent, a very conscious prioritization from Riot. By focusing the game meta to accommodate their new champion releases, they ensure that the game is always changing, an essential aspect to keep MOBAs alive. By now, Riot developers should know what works and doesn't when implementing certain champion playstyles into their games, especially for Wild Rift. Of course, they're still human, so they're bound to still make mistakes here and there and create some unintended champion mechanics, such as the double piercing damage from Galio's first ability. The relationship between Wild Rift and League of Legends parallels the relationship between a pair of siblings. The older sibling has to deal with the first-time parents, who really have no idea what they're doing, while the younger one benefits from the lessons that their parents learned from their experience with their first child. Of course, when comparing the champion pools, size is imperative to the discussion. Wild Rift has 63 champions compared to the whopping 155 champions in League of Legends. So League of Legends effectively has more than twice the amount of Wild Rift champions. This means that Wild Rift players are required to study far less to understand the champion matchups, once again making Wild Rift far more beginner-friendly. And since Wild Rift is more selective of its champion roster, they tend to be far more intuitive to play and understand. Imagine a beginner playing League of Legends. How would you explain how to play against Zoe, and how her champion mechanics exactly function? The smaller roster of Wild Rift creates a more controlled environment, but at the same time prevents play variety. More often than not, the same champions in Wild Rift are played over and over again, with many picks being neglected because of their weakness in the meta. This same concept can be applied for League of Legends, but since there's just more champions in the PC version and therefore more unique matchups, there's more opportunity for a weaker champion to see play. This rings especially true because of the banning feature, which allows each player to ban a single champion pick. These tend to be overpowered meta picks, allowing for weaker champions to have a bit of breathing room. Wild Rift lacks this specific feature, so there's nothing really stopping players from locking in the strongest meta champions. This feature is unlikely to be added into Wild Rift anytime in the foreseeable future, since the champion pool is just too small. If 10 unique bans were to be implemented, there's a probability that an entire role's roster would be decimated, creating an uneven playing field. The last comparison to make are the itemization option differences between the two games. In general, Wild Rift's items are reminiscent of the older items that existed in League of Legends, serving as a safe haven for Static Shiv and Frozen Mallet, both of which have been removed from the PC version. Wild Rift also has unique boot upgrades, transforming the shoe into an active item that provides great utility. The most notable difference between the two itemizations has to be the lack of mythic item implementation in Wild Rift. For those who don't know, these are pretty much the staple of every build in League PC, allowing for only one per champion while granting unique buffs to all their subsequent items. As expected, Wild Rift's itemization pathing is far simpler than League of Legends'. Now, we can't talk about Wild Rift without talking about its portability. This is a huge plus for the game since requiring a keyboard, mouse, and a strong computer to play League of Legends is a massive barrier of entry. Wild Rift simply needs a smartphone, allowing you to play outside, on the subway, or even at the comfort of your own bed. In conclusion, both games are fantastic, offering distinct pros and cons for each version. Wild Rift is, without a doubt, the better game for beginners since there's simply a lot less to memorize, study, and practice. In addition, the game is more accessible for gamers looking for a quick play rather than an hour-long commitment. League PC is definitely more detailed with a higher skill cap and learning curve than Wild Rift. League of Legends is the more effective time sink, not only because the games are longer, but put quite simply, there's a lot more to study. There's more nuanced details in runes, builds, champion picks, and even general mechanics, with enough depth in the science of minion wave management to have an entire course created out of it, and even more depth in learning every matchup for a single role. You watched the whole video! And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to hit that bell notification, like and subscribe, and give it to your second cousin that you don't really like, but you want him to succeed in Wild Rift, because that is what love is. And speaking of love, I love you guys. And thanks for stopping by my Instagram and saying hi. We've been having fun, but now we floss. I'm so sorry. It's time to go. Goodbye.